My name is Adrian. I'm 32, and I can tell you firsthand that money doesn't automatically protect you from family problems. I started working at 18, building my own business from nothing after deciding to leave college. At the time, my parents thought it was the worst decision I could make. "You'll never achieve anything without a degree," my mom said, while stirring her coffee like she was performing for an audience. My dad just grunted, his usual way of dismissing whatever I said. They had no idea I'd already launched my first online project, an e-commerce shop in a specific niche that would eventually grow into several companies generating millions each year. But back then, all they saw was a reckless kid who didn't want to put in effort. We were never a close family. My parents valued appearance and status more than anything. My older sister, Lily, was their perfect example, a corporate lawyer with a spotless LinkedIn profile, designer bags for every season, and the kind of calm confidence that made everyone go silent. She was the success they showcased to family friends. I was the warning story. Whenever I visited for dinner, they always found ways to slip in subtle insults disguised as concern. "Still doing that little internet thing?" my dad would ask, laughing like it was a phase I'd eventually outgrow, the way kids stop collecting comics. Lily would smile politely and add, "It's never too late to get a real job." For years, I let it go. There was no point trying to defend myself. They had already decided I wouldn't amount to anything. And honestly, I was too busy trying to build something from the ground up. That kind of work takes everything you have, and I didn't have time to convince people who had already made up their minds. So I kept my life private. My jaw tightened. "And what exactly are you saying?" He stopped pacing and pointed toward the door. "You've been living in that apartment for years, still asking us for help with small things. We can't keep enabling you." I blinked. "Enabling me? I've never asked you for money, not once." Lily let out a short laugh. "Please, you've been coasting. No one thinks you're actually earning a living off that little business. It's honestly sad." My mom cut in, her tone sharp. "We've decided it's time for you to stand on your own. No more coming here when you need something. No more expecting us to rescue you." I stared at them. "I don't need you to rescue me. I'm doing fine." My dad raised his voice. "If you're doing so well, then prove it. Get by without our help entirely. In fact, you can leave now. Live on the streets if you have to. Maybe that will teach you something." The room fell silent except for the rain. Lily sipped her wine like she was enjoying the moment. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept calm. They thought they were giving me a reality check. They thought I'd beg or promise to change. They had no idea I could buy their house several times over without touching my savings. I grabbed my jacket from the chair. "All right," I said quietly, almost smiling. "If that's what you want." My mom opened her mouth to add another comment, but I left before she could. I got into my car, a black sedan they assumed was a cheap used model, and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. I wasn't angry or hurt. I was almost amused, because I knew something they didn't. Something they were going to learn in a way they'd never forget. As the rain got heavier, I drove away, already knowing that in 3 weeks, their entire perception of me and of themselves would completely change. The first week after they kicked me out was unusually quiet. Not emotionally, I had plenty on my mind, but quiet in the sense that there were no calls, no texts, no attempts to check on me. I didn't expect an apology, but part of me thought they might at least see if I was okay. Instead, nothing. It felt like I had been erased from the family. I spent that week working from my home office, though home office doesn't really capture it. It was a modern penthouse overlooking the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a study filled with leather-bound books I'd collected for years. I could sit at my desk and see the skyline stretching across the horizon, a reminder of how far I had come from the kid they once called a failure. By the second week, I started hearing things through mutual acquaintances, hints that my parents and Lily were suddenly worried about me. Not actual concern, but rumors. Apparently, my mom told her church friends that I was living out of my car because my online project collapsed. Lily told one of my old classmates that I was finally learning life's lessons. They weren't just describing me as a failure, they were actively shaping the story. One night, I got a text from my cousin Jacob, one of the few family members who treated me fairly. Jacob: "Hey man, I heard something tonight. You okay?" Me: define okay. Jacob: "Your mom told people at dinner that you're basically homeless. She said you'll come crawling back soon." Me: interesting. Jacob: "Also Lily joked about giving you odd jobs at her firm when you're desperate enough. She said you'd look good fetching coffee." I read that last message several times. It wasn't surprising. Lily had made comments like that for years, but hearing it after they had already kicked me out hit differently. It felt like someone burning a bridge you had already decided never to cross, simply to make sure it was destroyed. In the third week, I decided to stop by their Sunday dinner, not as a guest. I wasn't invited, but just to observe. Jacob mentioned these dinners had become a weekly routine since I left. I drove there in my other car, the one they didn't know I owned, a sleek silver coupe that turned heads. I parked a few houses away and walked over. From the sidewalk, I could see them through the dining room window. My parents sat at the ends of the table, Lily beside them. They were smiling, talking, wine glasses raised. I could imagine the conversation. Lily discussing her latest case, my parents proud, followed by the usual comments about how I'd wasted my potential. I wasn't angry anymore. Instead, what I felt was colder. This wasn't just about them asking me to leave. It was about them using me as a symbol of failure to make themselves look better, rewriting my life to justify their view of me. 2 days later, my mom called, not to apologize, but to ask for a favor. Her tone was almost playful. "Adrian, we need your help moving some old furniture next weekend. Since you don't have much going on, you should have time." I had to stop myself from laughing. "Sorry, I'm busy." She sighed like I was making things difficult. "Busy with what?" "Work." She let out a small, knowing laugh. "Of course, your business." "Well, try to make time for family. You might need us someday." That was when I truly understood how deep their condescension ran. They genuinely thought they were the safety net I'd fall back on when life eventually overwhelmed me. They couldn't even imagine that I had been fine without them for years. And even though their attitude annoyed me, a part of me decided to play along. If I revealed the truth now, the impact wouldn't be nearly as strong. I wanted them to stack the insults, build their false version of events, and sink deeper into the story they'd created. Because once everything came out, I wanted it to be unforgettable. And that moment was getting closer. And that moment arrived sooner than they expected. By the fourth week, I had settled into a kind of detached calm about everything. I finally understood my place in their lives, and it no longer kept me awake at night. But just when I assumed their pettiness had peaked, they managed to reach an entirely new level. It began on a Thursday morning with an email from my bank. Subject line: unusual account activity. Immediate attention required. My first reaction was that it might be a phishing attempt, but once I logged in, I froze. Two large withdrawals, each over $7,000, had been taken from one of my older accounts. I rarely use that account anymore, but it stayed open because it was linked to a joint savings plan my parents set up when I was a teenager. I had intended to close it years earlier, but I never followed through. Both withdrawals were listed as in-person transactions from a branch located 2 blocks from my parents' house. At first, I tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe a banking mistake, maybe identity theft. But when I called the branch and got the details, my stomach sank. The teller remembered everything. She said my mother came in, claimed I had authorized her to access the funds for a family emergency, and walked out with cashier's checks both times. I wasn't sure what shook me more, the theft itself or how casually she did it, as if my money was simply hers whenever she felt like using it. I didn't call her immediately. I needed to be level-headed, and I wasn't. Instead, I called Jacob. Lily was holding a set of keys while my mom took a picture, likely to post online later. My dad laughed and clapped her on the shoulder, like she had accomplished something meaningful. I don't know how long I stayed there, but I remember the feeling inside me shifting. Until then, there had always been a thin thread of loyalty holding me back. Watching them celebrate with my money, that thread finally snapped. Later that week, my mom texted me, "Hope you're not upset about the savings account. It was just sitting there, and your sister needed help. You'll make more money. Family comes first." I stared at the message. No apology, no acknowledgement that she had stolen from me. Just a smug justification. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Something in me shifted, from quiet tolerance to a colder resolve. This wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about making it clear that the bridge they destroyed wasn't just gone. It had been replaced with a boundary they would never cross again. And they were about to understand exactly what that meant. After the SUV incident, the atmosphere around me felt heavier. Not in a way that crushed me, but the way the air feels before a storm. I wasn't angry in an impulsive way anymore. It was a quieter, steadier feeling that stayed with me. I didn't tell friends, coworkers, or even my business partners. I didn't want sympathy, and part of me felt ashamed that I had left myself exposed. I was supposed to be cautious and strategic, yet I had left that old account open like an unlocked door, and they simply walked through it. For the next couple of weeks, I pulled back from everything. I skipped certain meetings, declined social invitations, and avoided a networking event I never missed, so I wouldn't have to answer questions about my family. I told people I was focused on major projects, but the truth was I spent most of my time alone in my penthouse, letting the quiet settle around me. I wasn't depressed in the typical sense. I still woke up early, went to the gym, and kept my businesses running. But inside, I felt raw and hollow. Every thought about my parents or Lily replayed like a film with the same ending, me serving as the punchline to their private joke. One night, I sat at my kitchen island with a glass of whiskey, scrolling through old photos. One picture from 5 years ago showed my parents and Lily in front of a rented beach house. I was half in the frame, standing slightly away from them. That was the year they forgot to tell me the trip had been fully planned before inviting me. I slept on a couch while Lily had the master bedroom. The more I looked at that picture, the more I realized something. None of this was new. The theft, the lies, the way they embarrassed me. It was just the latest chapter in a long pattern. I had always been the one expected to adjust, to give more than I received, to accept whatever they decided. And maybe that's why they assumed they could take my money without consequences. They expected I'd sulk for a bit, give them the silent treatment, then return like nothing happened. That's when my thinking began to shift. I wasn't preparing to confront them right away. I wasn't going to show up demanding repayment. Instead, I started considering leverage, timing, and how much more effective it would be if I didn't just call them out, but dismantled the entire image they built around themselves. The first step was subtle. I had my lawyer quietly begin securing every account, property, and asset under my name, making sure there were no weak spots left for anyone to exploit. At the same time, I contacted someone who specialized in locating financial and legal information that wasn't easily accessible. I asked for a complete breakdown of my family's financial situation, not because I needed it immediately, but because I knew it would become useful. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. No calls, no texts, no visits. I wanted them to grow comfortable with my absence, to believe they had successfully pushed me out. The more confident they felt, the more unprepared they would be later. But distance had a cost. Some nights I sat in my living room with the city lights below me, thinking about how small my circle had become. My friends noticed the withdrawal, even though they didn't ask many questions. Jacob checked in a few times, but I kept the talks short. It was easier to stay focused than to explain everything. I knew I was isolating myself, and I knew it wasn't ideal. But I also knew it was necessary. When you're planning something significant, you can't afford distractions. You can't afford mistakes. And gradually, a date began forming in my mind. I didn't write it down or mark a calendar, but I knew when the moment would come. And I knew exactly where they would be when it happened. The shift wasn't sudden. It felt like slowly adjusting a dimmer switch. One week, I stayed quiet and low-key. The next, I returned to my routines with renewed clarity. I threw myself into my businesses with a focus I hadn't felt in months. My flagship company had been doing well, but I had 2 expansion projects I'd been putting off, one in Europe and one in Southeast Asia. I approved both in the same week. That meant bringing on new teams, forming partnerships, and securing major contracts that would expand our global presence. And it wasn't just about the revenue, though the numbers were impressive. I wanted my influence to be unmistakable. I wanted my footprint to be so solid that when the moment came, no one would question who I was or what I had built. At the same time, I began networking again, but this time with purpose. Instead of attending generic business events, I focused on high-level investor dinners, major tech summits, and charity galas. I made sure to be present in spaces my family would never expect me to be in. I connected with people who could shift the direction of entire industries with a single phone call. And I did all of it quietly. No social media posts, no announcements, because I wanted them to hear about my progress from others, not from me. By mid-year, one of my smaller companies, a software startup I had invested in, was acquired for an 8-figure sum. My share alone was enough to buy half the homes in my parents' neighborhood. The same week the deal finalized, I transferred a large portion into an already substantial investment account. The rest went into projects that would continue to grow steadily. But the real strength wasn't only in the money, it was in the relationships. Over coffee in Manhattan, I met with a well-known editor from a national business magazine. We talked about the industry, and somewhere between the drinks and the check, she mentioned a potential feature on self-made entrepreneurs who had been underestimated early on. I found the idea fitting. I didn't commit, but I kept her card. It simply wasn't the right moment yet. Meanwhile, the reports from my financial contact were coming in. And the picture they painted of my family's situation was eye-opening. My parents' retirement savings were far thinner than I expected. Lily, despite earning a strong salary, was drowning in debt thanks to poor investments and luxury spending she couldn't maintain. The SUV lease, the one funded with the down payment they took from me, barely covered the initial costs. On top of that, she had taken out a second mortgage on her condo the previous year. It wasn't just interesting to learn. It showed they were vulnerable. And that meant, when the time came, the effect of my choices wouldn't only be emotional, it would be practical and concrete. Outwardly, I kept my distance. The family still held their Sunday gatherings, still talked about me as if I had drifted away from reality, still pushed the narrative that I was lost somewhere out of reach. But through mutual acquaintances, I began hearing hints of uncertainty forming. A friend of Lily's had seen me at a luxury hotel in Singapore. In the middle of a meeting with sharply dressed executives, my mother's hairdresser said she overheard someone discussing a CEO named Adrian finalizing a major deal abroad. Rumors were beginning to circulate, and while they didn't confront me, I could sense their curiosity increasing. I didn't hurry anything. Influence is most effective when revealed gradually, and I had no intention of wasting it on an early confrontation. I wanted them unsettled, questioning their assumptions right up until the moment I made my move. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't just be about proving them wrong. It would redefine the relationship entirely and make it clear that whatever part they believed they still played in my life was finished. Revenge isn't about rushing. It's about accuracy. You don't act the second you see an opening. You wait until the moment is so precise that your decision can't be dismissed or reversed. By then, my contact had completed the investigation. What I saw confirmed my suspicions. Their outward stability was mostly an illusion. My parents were close to needing to downsize, but refused to acknowledge it. Lily's finances were worse than I expected. Maxed out credit cards, high-interest loans, and a lease she could barely handle. She had even fallen behind on her second mortgage payments. But one detail stood out above the rest. Hidden in my father's records was an early investment in a small property development company, one that had been struggling for a year. The major issue? He had personally guaranteed a loan for it. If the company failed, he would be responsible for the full amount, well into 6 figures. And according to the reports, it was only 3 months from collapse. That's when I understood how to prepare the next steps. I didn't need to destroy them financially. That would come off as petty. What I needed was to let them walk into the consequences created by their own assumptions, while I positioned myself in a place they never expected. Around this time, I received a call from the business magazine editor from Manhattan. She was moving forward with a feature on underestimated entrepreneurs and wanted me to be the centerpiece, an extensive spread with professional photos and my full story, especially the early years when people said I wouldn't succeed. I agreed immediately, but with one condition. The release needed to align with a specific month, the same month my father's failing investment was projected to collapse. As everything aligned, another unexpected opportunity appeared. A real estate investment firm I'd previously worked with reached out. They were acquiring distressed assets from small developers and needed trustworthy capital. I had been one of their top investors, so they gave me first access to the deals. When they sent the list, I almost laughed. Highlighted as high risk was a block of partially developed townhomes owned by my father's struggling company. I didn't commit immediately. I asked detailed questions, reviewed every document, and quietly arranged things so that if the company defaulted, as the reports indicated, it would allow me to acquire the entire project through the firm at a fraction of its value. That meant my father's company would lose the development, and I would own it without needing to interact with him at all. And the best part was that on paper, it would look like nothing more than a smart business decision. No direct conflict, no visible motive. While everything was moving into place, I kept my distance from the family, but I made sure my name continued to surface in their conversations. Jacob told me my mom had asked if I'd gotten lucky somehow because she'd heard I'd been flying first class overseas. Lily had apparently asked a mutual acquaintance whether I was genuinely doing well or just putting on a show. Their curiosity was growing, and I knew it would soon shift into something much stronger. I wasn't just stepping into a position of influence. I was preparing to control the entire situation, one they didn't even know existed. And when it was time to act, it would be public, clear, and perfectly aligned with the moment they needed help the most. When the month finally arrived, everything I'd set up over the past 6 months was lined up like a row of dominoes, ready to fall. All I had to do was start the chain. The business magazine feature was released on the first Monday of the month. My face was on the cover. Polished suit, city skyline behind me, and a bold headline, "From Doubt to Determination, the self-made visionary who proved everyone wrong." The article didn't mention my family by name, and it didn't have to. The message was obvious. I had been underestimated, dismissed by those closest to me, and had built a multi-million-dollar empire on my own. The timing couldn't have been better. Within hours, the story was circulating online, shared across social media, business groups, and even the professional circles my sister followed. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Former colleagues, old classmates, and distant acquaintances were all sending congratulations. And right on cue, I received a text from my mother. "Adrian, we saw the magazine. We had no idea things had grown this much for you. We're proud of you, proud." After years of dismissal, after taking from me, now they were proud. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, my father's development company officially defaulted on its loan. The bank acted quickly, and the real estate investment firm I'd partnered with stepped in to acquire the project at a heavy discount. My investment gave me full control of the entire development. On paper, it looked like a sound business deal. In reality, it placed my father's largest asset directly in my hands without him knowing. I waited 3 days before the next step. Then I had my assistant arrange a meeting with my parents and Lily at a neutral, upscale restaurant downtown. It was framed as a discussion about a business opportunity. And since their attitude toward me had shifted dramatically after the magazine feature, they accepted immediately. When they arrived, they were cheerful. My mother hugged me for the first time in years. My father shook my hand as if we were longtime business partners. Lily complimented my suit with a politeness I'd never heard from her. We ordered, made small talk, and halfway through the meal, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were the ownership documents for the development project they'd considered their major investment. My father's smile faded as he read them. This "This is our property," he said slowly. "Correction?" I replied calmly. "It was your property. It's mine now." They stared in silence. I didn't raise my voice or show emotion. I simply explained the facts. Their company had defaulted, the bank had sold the project, and I had acquired it legally, at a reasonable price, through a firm I trusted. I explained everything as cleanly and directly as possible. My mother's face reddened. "Adrian, how could you?" "How could I?" I answered, my tone firm but controlled. "The same way you took from my account without permission. The same way you handed it to Lily like it belonged to you. The same way you pushed me out and told people I had nothing. I applied the lessons you taught me." Lily didn't respond. My father leaned back, looking at the papers, then at me. For the first time, he seemed diminished, not physically, but in presence. I leaned forward. "The difference between us is that I didn't need to lie or steal to do this. I played the long game. And when this development turns a profit, and it will, none of it will have your name on it." The table stayed quiet, except for the sounds of nearby diners. There were no apologies, no excuses. Just silence as the reality set in. I finished my meal, paid the bill, and stood. "Enjoy your evening," I said, keeping my tone polite. "And don't worry about the staff at the site. Their jobs are secure. Only yours have changed." Then I walked out, leaving them under the warm lights of the restaurant, as their new position in my world became undeniable. The fallout came sooner than expected. 3 days later, Jacob called. His voice was uncertain, somewhere between impressed and concerned. "Your parents are falling apart," he said. "Your dad hasn't left the house in 2 days. Your mom's been calling anyone she can to try to fix things. But everyone already knows you own the property. People are talking." Word had spread far beyond our family. My father's failed investment wasn't a quiet issue. It was now a topic in their social circle. The same people they used to impress at dinners were whispering about how their reckless son had somehow outmaneuvered them professionally. I hadn't had to do anything. People love a twist, and this one was too striking to ignore. Lily wasn't doing any better. Her SUV lease was up, and without my parents covering her emergency expenses, she had to switch to a modest car. For someone whose image depended on luxury, that shift was a major blow. Not long after, I heard she listed her condo for sale to stay ahead of her financial problems. My parents reached out twice. The first came from my mother. "Can we talk? We're still family." I ignored it. The second was a voicemail from my father. His voice sounded strained. "We need a way forward. You can't just cut us off." I deleted it without finishing. I hadn't distanced myself out of anger. I simply accepted that nothing meaningful was left. They had shown who they were when they took from me, lied about me, and treated my absence as a relief. I had responded with the same clarity, just without sacrificing my integrity. Months later, the development began turning a profit. The townhomes sold faster than projected, and my returns made what they took from me feel trivial. Sometimes I drove by the completed site and watched families move in, children playing along the new streets. It was all mine now, built through their choices and my patience. I never saw them at Sunday dinners again. In fact, I never saw them at all. Occasionally, Jacob shared updates. How my parents sold their vacation home. How Lily was working extra cases to keep afloat. But these were fragments of a life that no longer intersected with mine. The last time my mother contacted me, it was a short, rigid email. "You've changed." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. She was mistaken. I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped playing the role they tried to assign me. Standing on my penthouse balcony that night, I realized that was the real victory. Not the profit, not the property, but the understanding that I never needed their approval or their definition of who I should be. The final time I reflected on it, I smiled and said quietly to myself, "For once, I didn't just avoid the streets. I bought the whole block."